The phone rang at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, jolting me from my coffee and the peaceful view of Portland's misty mountains outside my apartment window. I saw Dad's name flash across the screen and felt that familiar knot in my stomach. 6 months. It had been 6 months since I packed my entire life into a moving truck and drove 2,000 miles from Chicago to Oregon, and this was the first time he was calling me. "Allison, we need you home immediately." His voice boomed through the speaker without even a hello. "Marcus's wedding is this Saturday and we need to look perfect as a family." I nearly choked on my coffee. They still didn't know I had moved. Let me take you back to where this all began, because understanding my family dynamics is crucial to grasping how monumentally they had failed to notice my absence. Growing up as the middle child in the Patterson household meant existing in a perpetual state of invisibility, sandwiched between Marcus, the golden boy who could do no wrong, and Emma, the baby who received endless coddling and attention. Marcus, 3 years older than me, had sailed through law school at Northwestern and now worked at one of Chicago's most prestigious firms. Every family dinner centered around his latest case victories, his expensive suits, or his impressive salary. Mom would beam with pride whenever neighbors asked about him rattling off his achievements like a well-rehearsed resume. Emma, 4 years younger, had chosen the path of medicine, currently grinding through her residency at Rush University Medical Center. Despite being 26 years old, she maintained the role of the cherished youngest, calling home whenever she needed money, emotional support, or someone to handle her responsibilities. And then there was me, Allison, 30 years old and completely overlooked. I worked as a freelance graphic designer from my childhood bedroom, which my parents viewed as convenient rather than impressive. While my siblings lived their independent lives, I became the family's unofficial crisis manager, the one who dropped everything when emergencies arose. When Emma needed someone to watch her twin boys Jake and Connor during her overnight shifts, guess who got the call? When Mom needed help organizing charity events for her book club, who spent weekends addressing invitations and coordinating vendors. When Dad's accounting firm needed updated marketing materials, who worked for free to keep the family business looking professional. The answer was always the same: Allison would handle it. I told them about the job opportunity in Portland at least a dozen times during family dinners that winter. Green Earth Design. A sustainable graphic design firm had offered me a position as senior creative director, with a salary that doubled what I made freelancing. The work aligned perfectly with my environmental values, and Portland's culture felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the suffocating expectations of Chicago. But every time I brought up the move, someone would interrupt. Marcus would start talking about his latest courtroom victory, or Emma would complain about her demanding attending physician, or Mom would launch into neighborhood gossip. Dad would nod absently while scrolling through his phone, occasionally grunting in acknowledgement, but clearly not processing my words. The day I finally decided to leave was during Emma's birthday dinner at our usual restaurant, Giovanni's Italian. I'd spent the afternoon helping Mom prepare for the party, picking up the custom cake, decorating the private dining room, and coordinating with the waitstaff. During dinner, Emma announced she was thinking about switching residency programs, which would require someone to help her move apartments and watch the boys for several weekends. "Allison can help with all that," Mom said automatically, not even looking in my direction. "She's always available." That phrase hit me like a physical blow. Always available. That was how they saw me. Not as a person with dreams and ambitions, but as a permanent fixture, a resource to be utilized whenever needed. I tried one more time. "Actually, I won't be available because I'm moving to Portland in 3 weeks for my new job." Dad glanced up from his phone. "Portland, Maine. That seems far for a design job." "Oregon." I corrected, my voice growing smaller. "Oh, right," Emma said dismissively, cutting into her tiramisu. "When do you think you'll be back? Because I really need help with the apartment search, and Mom's birthday is next month." They had heard me, but they hadn't listened. In their minds, my life existed solely to support theirs. The final straw came the morning of my departure. I had packed everything I owned into a 16-foot U-Haul truck, said goodbye to my few Chicago friends, and loaded my car with the essentials for the cross-country drive. Before leaving, I wrote a heartfelt letter explaining my decision, my new address, my phone number, and my hopes for maintaining our family relationships despite the distance. I left the letter prominently displayed on the kitchen table, weighted down with Mom's favorite crystal paperweight to ensure it wouldn't be missed. The letter detailed my excitement about the new job, my gratitude for their support over the years, and my promise to visit during holidays. When I returned to Chicago 6 weeks later to collect some items I had left in storage, I found that letter crumpled in the kitchen recycling bin. Mom had used the back of it to jot down a grocery list, milk, bread, eggs, wine for book club call plumber about bathroom sink. My heartfelt goodbye had become scratch paper. Portland welcomed me with open arms and rain-soaked streets that somehow felt more nurturing than Chicago's harsh winters. My new apartment sat in the Pearl District, a converted loft with exposed brick walls and enormous windows that showcased the city's green landscape. For the first time in my adult life, I was living somewhere that felt like home rather than temporary accommodation. Green Earth design exceeded every expectation. My colleagues treated me as a valuable team member rather than free labor. Jessica, the firm's founder, appreciated my environmental marketing background and immediately involved me in high-profile projects. Within 2 weeks, I was leading the rebranding campaign for a local organic food cooperative work that felt meaningful and aligned with my values. But despite the professional fulfillment and beautiful surroundings, I found myself checking my phone obsessively during those first weeks. Surely my family would notice my absence eventually. Surely someone would call to ask how I was settling in, whether I needed anything, or simply to hear my voice. The silence was deafening. I joined the family group chat that Mom had created years ago for coordinating schedules and sharing photos. The messages continued flowing as if nothing had changed. Emma posted pictures of the boys at soccer practice asking for advice about managing their schedules. Marcus shared photos from expensive restaurants with his fiancée Sarah, a pediatric nurse he had met during a hospital consultation case. Mom posted constant updates about neighborhood drama and Dad's latest golf tournament results. They discussed weekend plans, shared grocery lists, and coordinated family dinner arrangements. My absence from these gatherings went completely unmentioned. 3 weeks into my Portland life, I met Tyler, an environmental engineer who worked for the city's water management department. We connected at a coffee shop near Powell's Books, bonding over our shared passion for sustainability and our Midwestern backgrounds. He was warm, attentive, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and experiences. "Your family must miss having you so far away," he said during our second date as we walked through the Japanese garden. I laughed bitterly. "Actually, they haven't noticed I'm gone." Tyler stopped walking, his brown eyes filled with concern. "What do you mean they haven't noticed?" Explaining the situation felt surreal. How do you tell someone that your own family is so self-absorbed they failed to realize you moved across the country? Tyler listened with growing amazement and anger on my behalf. "That's not normal, Allison," he said gently. "Families are supposed to notice when someone they love disappears from their daily lives." Meanwhile, the family group chat continued its regular programming. Mom posted photos from Emma's residency graduation ceremony, a formal affair at the medical center, where Emma received recognition for her outstanding performance. I studied the pictures, noting my empty spot in the family photos. They had arranged themselves in a line for pictures, leaving no gap where I would have stood. The ceremony had been planned for months, dates discussed repeatedly in our group chat. I had even helped Mom choose her outfit during one of our last phone conversations before my move. But on the day itself, no one seemed to register that I wasn't there. I decided to conduct a small experiment. During a particularly active group chat discussion about Marcus's engagement party planning, I simply stopped responding. For 3 days, I watched as they assigned me tasks, asked for my opinions, and expected my input without acknowledging that I hadn't participated in the conversation. "Allison needs to pick up the flowers," Mom wrote. "Has Allison called the caterer about dietary restrictions?" Emma added. Allison should coordinate with Sarah about decorations. Marcus contributed. They were planning my involvement in an event I couldn't physically attend, still operating under the assumption that I lived in my childhood bedroom and remained perpetually available for family obligations. The most painful moment came during a video call between Emma and Mom that I accidentally joined while trying to leave the group chat. Through the screen, I could see Mom sitting in our family kitchen, Emma's face in a smaller window as she called from the hospital break room. "Is Allison still sulking in her room?" Emma asked, rolling her eyes. "She's been so antisocial lately. She never comes down for dinner anymore." Mom shrugged dismissively. "You know how she gets when she's stressed about work. She'll come around when she needs something." They were literally discussing my antisocial behavior while I sat in my Portland apartment 2,000 miles away, completely absent from their physical reality. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. I quickly left the call before they noticed my presence, but the damage was done. They had created a narrative to explain my absence that didn't require them to actually pay attention to my whereabouts. In their minds, I was simply being moody and withdrawn, hiding in my bedroom like a teenager, rather than building a new life in a different state. That night, I called Tyler in tears, finally allowing myself to feel the full impact of their neglect. He came over with Thai food and spent the evening helping me process the emotional abandonment. "You deserve so much better than this," he said, holding me close on my couch. "A real family celebrates when someone they love finds success and happiness. They don't just expect you to remain frozen in place serving their needs forever." As autumn settled over Portland, painting the city in brilliant oranges and reds, I began to truly appreciate my freedom from family obligations. I joined a hiking group that explored the Columbia River Gorge on weekends. Jessica invited me to dinner parties with other creative professionals who valued my opinions and treated me as an equal. Tyler and I grew closer, building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's lives. But the silence from Chicago continued to sting. Every family milestone that passed without acknowledgement felt like a small death, a confirmation that I had never really mattered to them beyond my utility. When Dad's birthday arrived and no one asked why I hadn't sent a card or attended his party, I realized that my worst fears were true. I had been invisible in my own family long before I moved away. The physical distance had simply made the emotional distance impossible to ignore. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving week. I had planned to fly back to Chicago for the holiday, hoping that surely they would want me there for such an important family gathering. I waited for someone to ask about my travel plans, to coordinate pickup times from the airport, or to inquire about dietary preferences for the meal. Instead, I watched through social media as they prepared for Thanksgiving dinner as if I didn't exist. Emma posted pictures of herself and the boys helping Mom in the kitchen. Marcus shared photos of him and Sarah picking up wine for the celebration. Dad posted about preparing his famous stuffing recipe for the annual feast. 5 days before Thanksgiving, I made one last attempt to gauge their expectations. I called home, pretending to be sick, curious to see if my potential absence from the holiday would register as significant. "Hi, Mom, it's me," I said, adding a slight rasp to my voice. "I think I'm coming down with something pretty bad. I might not be able to help with Thanksgiving dinner prep." "Oh, honey, that's terrible timing," she replied, but her tone suggested mild inconvenience rather than concern for my health. "Can you try to push through it? We really need you to handle the seating arrangements and coordinate with Emma about side dishes." "I don't know if I'll be feeling up to it." I pressed, curious how far I could push this charade. "Well, just see how you feel tomorrow morning. If you're still sick, you can work from upstairs. The dining room table needs to be set anyway, and you're so good at making everything look elegant." She thought I was calling from my bedroom. On Thanksgiving Day, 2,600 miles away, she believed I was simply upstairs nursing a cold rather than building a completely new life in Oregon. That conversation shattered the last of my illusions about their awareness or concern for my well-being. They had reduced me to a function rather than a person, someone whose only value lay in her availability to solve their problems and manage their logistics. I spent Thanksgiving with Tyler's family in nearby Beaverton, experiencing what healthy family dynamics actually looked like. His parents asked thoughtful questions about my work, expressed genuine interest in my Portland experiences, and treated me as a valued guest rather than unpaid help. His sister Rachel and her husband included me in conversations, sought my opinions, and made sure I felt welcomed and appreciated. The contrast was devastating and liberating simultaneously. December arrived with Portland's characteristic drizzle and an unexpected burst of activity in the family group chat. Marcus had been dating Sarah for 2 years, and their relationship had progressed with the steady inevitability of a well-planned legal case. She was perfect for him in every measurable way: beautiful, accomplished, financially stable, and appropriately impressed by his professional success. The announcement came on a gray Tuesday morning while I sat in Green Earth Design's conference room, reviewing mock-ups for a renewable energy company's annual report. My phone buzzed with the distinctive chime of the family group chat, and I glanced down to see Marcus's message. "Big news, everyone. Sarah and I are engaged. Wedding date is set for March 15th. Hope everyone can make it." The chat immediately exploded with congratulations, heart emojis, and excited questions about venue details and dress codes. Mom launched into full party planning mode, typing rapidly as ideas poured from her fingertips. "This is wonderful news. We need to start planning immediately. Allison, can you handle the floral arrangements and coordination with vendors? You have such a good eye for these things." Emma quickly joined the planning frenzy. "Sarah, what are your colors? We should coordinate bridesmaid dresses. Allison, you'll need to order yours soon if we want alterations done in time." I stared at my phone in amazement. They were planning a wedding that was 3 months away, automatically assigning me major responsibilities, all while believing I lived in my childhood bedroom in Chicago. The logistical impossibility of their assumptions was staggering. Marcus added fuel to the fire with his next message. "Sarah and I were hoping Allison could be maid of honor. She's always been so good at organizing family events, and we trust her to make sure everything runs smoothly." The irony was almost comical. They wanted me to coordinate a wedding from 2,000 miles away using vendors in a city I no longer lived in, while maintaining my supposed availability for last-minute emergencies and changes. Sarah, who I had met only briefly during a few family dinners, chimed in with sweet enthusiasm. "Allison, I would be honored to have you as my maid of honor. I know how much Marcus values your support, and I've heard wonderful things about your event planning skills from your mom." What followed was a detailed discussion of wedding logistics that grew more elaborate and demanding by the hour. Mom suggested the venue should be the Palmer House Hotel downtown, the same location where she and Dad had celebrated their 25th anniversary. Emma recommended specific photographers and caterers based on her medical school friends' recent weddings. And through it all, they assigned me an ever-growing list of responsibilities. Allison should visit the venue next week to check their floral options. Allison needs to coordinate with the photographer about family photo arrangements. Allison can handle the welcome bags for out-of-town guests. Allison should meet with the wedding planner to finalize timeline details. I watched this conversation unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. They were planning my intensive involvement in an event that required constant Chicago presence and coordination, still operating under the delusion that I remained perpetually available in my childhood bedroom. The planning reached fever pitch over the following weeks. Mom created multiple shared documents outlining seating charts, menu preferences, and decoration themes. Emma started a separate group chat specifically for bridesmaid coordination, automatically including me in discussions about dress fittings and bachelorette party planning. Marcus typically focused on the big picture, rather than details, would periodically send messages like, "Whatever Allison thinks is best. She knows our family's style better than anyone." The weight of their expectations grew heavier with each passing day. They had constructed an elaborate fantasy wedding timeline that required my constant presence and expertise, all while remaining completely unaware that I lived in a different time zone. I found myself taking screenshots of their messages documenting the surreal nature of their planning process. Tyler would read them over my shoulder during our evening dinners, shaking his head in disbelief. "How do they think you're going to coordinate vendor meetings from Portland?" he asked one night as we shared pad thai from our favorite Thai restaurant. "They don't think about it," I replied, scrolling through yet another detailed message from Mom about centerpiece options. In their minds, I'm still sitting in my childhood bedroom, perpetually available to handle whatever they need. The most painful part was watching Sarah's genuine excitement about including me in the wedding party. Her messages were warm and inclusive, clearly believing that I was an eager and available sister-in-law to be. She sent photos of potential bridesmaid dresses, asked for my input on ceremony music, and shared her vision for a beautiful spring celebration. "I'm so glad Marcus has such a supportive sister," she wrote in a private message. "He talks about how reliable and helpful you are all the time. I can't wait for us to become closer as sisters." Her kindness made the situation even more complicated. Sarah was operating on false information, believing that I was an enthusiastic participant in her wedding planning rather than someone who lived thousands of miles away and hadn't even been properly invited. 3 weeks before the wedding, the planning reached its crescendo. Mom had booked venues, Emma had coordinated bridesmaid appointments, and Marcus had finalized the guest list. Through their shared documents and group chats, I could see that they had created an incredibly detailed timeline for wedding weekend that included numerous events requiring my presence and coordination. Friday night rehearsal dinner, where I was supposed to give a welcome speech and coordinate seating for out-of-town relatives. Saturday morning bridesmaid brunch that I was meant to host at the family house. Saturday afternoon wedding ceremony where I would walk down the aisle as maid of honor and handle emergency coordination. Saturday evening reception, where I was responsible for managing the timeline and ensuring smooth transitions between events. Sunday morning family goodbye brunch that I was expected to organize for departing guests. They had planned an entire wedding weekend around my supposed availability and enthusiasm, never once confirming that I could actually attend or wanted to participate in these responsibilities. The final absurdity came when Emma posted in the group chat about picking up my bridesmaid dress. "Allison, I grabbed your dress from the boutique today since you've been so busy with work lately. It's hanging in your closet. The seamstress said the alterations look perfect." She had literally purchased clothing for someone she believed was in the house, but hadn't actually seen in months. The dress was hanging in my childhood closet while I sat in my Portland apartment, watching my family plan a wedding that required my constant presence at an event I hadn't even been formally invited to attend. That night, I called Jessica at Green Earth Design to request time off for a family wedding, explaining the complicated situation to my understanding boss. "Let me get this straight," Jessica said slowly. "Your family planned an entire wedding around your involvement, but they don't know you moved to Portland 6 months ago." "That's exactly right," I confirmed. "And they think you've been living in your childhood bedroom this whole time, just choosing not to participate in family dinners or activities. Apparently they think I've been sulking about work stress." Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "Allison, that's not normal family dysfunction. That's complete emotional neglect." I knew she was right, but seeing my family's behavior laid out so starkly was still jarring. They had created an elaborate fantasy version of my life that required no actual attention to my real circumstances or well-being. The wedding was now 3 days away, and I still had not received a single direct conversation about my attendance, my role in the ceremony, or my feelings about Marcus's marriage. They had simply assumed my participation based on their expectations of my perpetual availability. I was about to discover just how deeply their assumptions ran and how completely they had failed to see me as an independent person with my own life and choices. Tuesday morning arrived with Portland's typical January gloom rain pattering against my apartment windows as I worked on a logo design for a local solar panel company. My phone had been unusually quiet, which should have been my first warning that something significant was building in the family pressure cooker back in Chicago. At exactly 9:30, Dad's name appeared on my screen with that familiar ringtone that always made my stomach clench. In our family, Dad making direct phone calls meant serious business. He was a man of few words who preferred to let Mom handle most family communication, emerging only for major announcements or disciplinary actions. "Allison," his voice boomed through the speaker without preamble. "We need you home immediately. Marcus's wedding is this Saturday, and we need to look perfect as a family." I set down my coffee, trying to process the surreal nature of this conversation. "Dad, I live in Portland now. I moved here 6 months ago." There was a pause, followed by what sounded like papers shuffling. "Portland. What are you talking about?" "Stop being dramatic, Allison. This isn't the time for your artistic temperament." "I'm not being dramatic," I said, my voice remaining steady despite the absurdity. "I literally live in Oregon now. I took a job here and moved across the country." "That's ridiculous," he said dismissively. "Your mother saw you upstairs just yesterday. She asked you to help with the wedding favors, and you said you were too busy with client work." The delusion was so complete, so thoroughly entrenched, that I felt like I was having a conversation with someone experiencing a complete break from reality. Mom had been talking to an empty bedroom for months, apparently holding full conversations with my absence and interpreting silence as sulky compliance. "Dad, I haven't been in that house since August," I said firmly. "I moved to Portland for a senior creative director position at an environmental design firm. I have an apartment in the Pearl District. I've been living here for 6 months." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear him breathing heavily, the sound of someone whose worldview was being challenged in a way that didn't compute. "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny," he said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when closing business deals. "Sarah's family is flying in from Boston. We have the rehearsal dinner on Friday night, and you're supposed to give the welcome speech. Marcus is counting on you to make sure everything runs smoothly." "I never agreed to give any speech," I replied. "Nobody asked me to be in the wedding. You all just assumed I would participate and assigned me responsibilities without ever having a conversation about what I wanted or whether I was available." "Available." His voice rose an octave. "Of course you're available. You work from home, doing your little computer projects. This is your brother's wedding, Allison. This is family." The phrase "little computer projects" hit me like a slap. After 6 years of building a successful graphic design business, after landing a prestigious position at one of Portland's most respected environmental firms, my father still viewed my career as a hobby that could be dismissed whenever family obligations arose. "My work isn't little computer projects, Dad. I'm a senior creative director leading multi-million-dollar rebranding campaigns, and I can't just drop everything to fly back for a wedding that I wasn't properly invited to." "Invited?" he sputtered. "You don't need an invitation to your own brother's wedding. Your family, you live here." "I don't live there anymore," I said, my patience finally beginning to fray. "I haven't lived there since August. I moved to Portland and none of you noticed because you never actually pay attention to anything I do or say." The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief and growing anger. When Dad spoke again, his voice had dropped to the dangerous, quiet tone that meant serious consequences were coming. "Let me make something very clear to you, young lady," he said. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it stops now. Your mother has been planning this wedding for months. Sarah's family is expecting to meet you. Marcus has been telling people about his supportive sister who's handling all the coordination. Then maybe Marcus should have actually talked to his supportive sister before making those claims," I shot back. "Don't you dare take that tone with me." Dad's voice turned ice cold. "I built this family business from nothing, and I plan to split it 3 ways between you kids when your mother and I retire. But if you're going to be selfish and dramatic, maybe I need to reconsider those arrangements." The inheritance threat landed exactly as he intended it, to a nuclear weapon deployed to ensure compliance. Dad owned Patterson and Associates, a successful accounting firm that served Chicago's north suburban business community. The company was worth several $1 million, representing the financial security that could set up all 3 of his children for life. For years, he had used this inheritance as leverage to ensure our cooperation with family expectations. Study business in college or risk your inheritance. Live at home after graduation to save money for the family, or risk your inheritance? Prioritize family obligations over personal relationships, or risk your inheritance? Are you seriously threatening to disinherit me because I moved to Oregon for a better job? I asked, my voice rising. I'm threatening to disinherit you because you're being selfish and irresponsible, he replied. Family comes first, Allison. It always comes first. If you can't understand that basic principle, then maybe you don't deserve to benefit from everything your mother and I have built. In the background, I could hear Mom's voice, though her words weren't entirely clear. Dad must have put the phone on speaker or moved closer to where she was sitting. What's she saying? Mom asked. She's claiming she moved to Oregon and can't come to the wedding. Dad explained his tone, suggesting he was discussing a child's ridiculous fantasy. Oregon. Mom's voice was incredulous. That's absurd. I just talked to her yesterday about picking up her bridesmaid shoes. Tell her to stop being silly and come downstairs so we can finalize the seating chart. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Mom genuinely believed she had been having conversations with me, apparently filling in my side of imaginary dialogues to maintain her version of reality. Did you hear that? Dad asked. Your mother confirms you've been here all along. Now stop this nonsense and get home immediately. The rehearsal dinner is in 3 days and we have too much work to do for your little drama performance. Something snapped inside me at that moment. 6 months of emotional neglect, years of being taken for granted, decades of having my independence and dreams dismissed as inconvenience, all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. You want to know what's really dramatic, Dad? I said, my voice becoming calm and controlled in the way that signals dangerous waters ahead. I've been documenting everything for 6 months. Every family dinner I missed where nobody asked where I was, every birthday card that wasn't sent to my new address, every time you assigned me work for events I couldn't physically attend. Documenting what, he asked, confusion replacing anger. Your complete failure as a family, I replied, and it's time everyone knew the truth. I heard Mom's sharp intake of breath in the background, followed by whispered conversation I couldn't quite make out. When Dad spoke again, his voice had taken on a different quality, uncertainty creeping in around the edges of his authority. Now listen here, Allison. You're upset, and I understand that wedding planning can be stressful, but making threats isn't going to solve anything. I'm not making threats, I said quietly. I'm making promises. The line went quiet except for the sound of their whispered conference. I could picture them in the kitchen where I'd grown up, probably standing near the island, where Mom planned all her social events, trying to process information that didn't fit their carefully constructed version of reality. When Dad came back on the line, his voice carried the weight of someone who was beginning to realize that the situation might be more serious than he initially believed. What exactly are you planning to do? He asked. And that's when I delivered the words that would freeze him in place and change everything forever. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds as I gathered my thoughts, feeling the weight of 6 months of documented neglect and years of accumulated resentment crystallizing into this single moment of reckoning. Dad, I said, my voice steady and calm. I've been gone for 6 months and you never noticed, but I noticed everything. I documented every family dinner I missed where no one asked where I was, every birthday card that wasn't sent to my new address, every time you used my empty chair as storage. I've shared this timeline with everyone coming to Marcus's wedding. They now know exactly what kind of family they're celebrating. You can disinherit me, but you can't uninherit the truth. The silence that followed was so complete I wondered if the call had dropped. Then I heard what sounded like a chair scraping against the kitchen floor, followed by Dad's voice, but quieter now, almost whispered. What do you mean you shared it? I used my professional skills as a graphic designer to create a comprehensive presentation, documenting our family dysfunction. I continued, surprised by how calm I felt. Screenshots of group chat conversations where you assigned me tasks while I was living in another state. photos of family gatherings where you used my empty chair for purses and shopping bags, a timeline showing 6 months of family events that I missed without a single person asking where I was. I could hear frantic whispering in the background, now Mom's voice rising in pitch as she spoke rapidly to Dad. I sent the presentation to Sarah 3 days ago, I continued. Also to Emma's boyfriend David Marcus's law firm partners who were invited to the wedding, and about 15 extended family members who were planning to attend Saturday's celebration. You did what? Dad's voice cracked slightly. I thought they should know what kind of family dynamics they were celebrating, I said. Turns out, when you lay out the facts objectively, our family's behavior looks pretty shocking to outside observers. The presentation had been a labor of both love and documentation. Using my professional design skills, I had created a 24-page digital booklet titled The Invisible Daughter, a 6-month timeline of family neglect. It included screenshots of group chat conversations, photos from family social media accounts, and a detailed calendar showing every missed event, an unreturned call. The opening page featured a side-by-side comparison on the left, a screenshot of Mom assigning me wedding tasks in December. On the right, a photo of my Portland apartment lease agreement dated August 15th. The visual impact was immediate and undeniable. I had included a timeline showing major family events I had missed. September 10th, Emma's residency graduation ceremony. Family photos show my empty spot in group pictures. October 3rd, Dad's 62nd birthday party. Group chat shows Mom asking me to come downstairs and help serve cake while I was attending a client presentation in Portland. November 22nd, Thanksgiving dinner. Social media posts show family celebration with my chair used to hold Mom's purse. December 15th, Marcus's engagement party. Detailed planning conversations show me being assigned coordination responsibilities for an event I couldn't attend. Each entry included screenshots, photos, and documentation that painted a clear picture of a family so self-absorbed they had failed to notice their daughter's physical absence for half a year. But the most devastating section was titled Conversations with an Empty Room. I had documented instances where Mom had posted in the family chat about talking to me upstairs, including specific quotes and timestamps that proved she had been having full conversations with my empty bedroom. Mom told the family chat on December 3rd that she asked Allison to help with Christmas card addressing, and she agreed to do it this weekend. One entry read, Allison was attending a company holiday party in Portland at the time of this supposed conversation. Another entry, Mom posted on January 8th that Allison is being antisocial and won't come down for dinner, but she promised to help with wedding favors tomorrow. Allison was on a hiking trip in the Columbia River Gorge with Portland friends. The evidence was overwhelming and impossible to dismiss. Why would you do this to us? Dad asked, his voice sounding older and more fragile than I had ever heard it. I didn't do this to you, I replied. I documented what you did to me. There's a difference. But sending it to Sarah's family, to Marcus's colleagues, he started. They deserved to know who they were celebrating with, I interrupted. Sarah especially deserved to understand the family dynamics she was marrying into. She's been planning this wedding thinking she has a supportive future sister-in-law who's excited to be part of her special day. Instead, she has a family that's so dysfunctional they didn't notice their daughter moved across the country. I could hear Mom crying in the background now, her voice rising in what sounded like panic. She's ruining everything, Mom wailed. What will people think? What will Sarah's parents say when they see this? Maybe they'll think about what kind of family allows someone to disappear for 6 months without noticing, I said. Maybe they'll wonder why the bride's future in-laws are so disconnected from each other that they can plan major family events around someone who doesn't even live in the same state. Dad's breathing was heavy now, and when he spoke, his voice had lost all its authoritative bluster. How do we fix this? He asked. You can't fix 6 months of neglect with a phone call, Dad, I said. You can't undo years of taking me for granted by suddenly paying attention when it's convenient for you. But the wedding, he started. The wedding will happen or it won't, I said. That's up to Marcus and Sarah now that they have complete information about our family situation. The presentation had concluded with a section titled Moving Forward that offered my perspective on healthy family relationships. I had written about the difference between obligation and love, between utility and value, between being needed and being wanted. A healthy family notices when someone is gone. The final page read, "They celebrate achievements, support dreams, and treat each member as valuable beyond their usefulness to others. They communicate directly rather than assuming compliance. They respect independence while maintaining connection." I had ended with my contact information in Portland and an invitation for any family member who wanted to build a genuine relationship based on mutual respect and authentic communication. I included my actual address and phone number in Portland, I told Dad. If anyone wants to have a real conversation about rebuilding our relationships, they know how to reach me. But I'm done being the family's unpaid crisis manager and event coordinator. "Allison, please," Dad said, his voice breaking slightly. "We can work this out. Just come home for the wedding and we'll figure out everything else afterward." "No, Dad," I said firmly. "I am home. Portland is my home now. If you want to see me, you're welcome to visit. If you want to have a relationship with me, it starts with acknowledging who I actually am and where I actually live." "But what about Marcus's wedding?" Mom's voice came through clearly now, apparently having taken the phone from Dad. "What about it?" I asked. "You're supposed to be the maid of honor. You're supposed to give the welcome speech. Everything is planned around you being here." "Then maybe you should have planned with me instead of around me," I said. "Maybe you should have had a conversation about what I wanted instead of assuming my participation. We just assumed you'd want to be part of your brother's special day." Mom said, her voice plaintive. "You assumed I'd be available to work for your brother's special day," I corrected. "There's a difference between being included and being utilized." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes with my parents, alternating between anger bargaining and desperate pleading. They offered to pay for last-minute flights, promised to have serious conversations about family communication, and even suggested they could work around my Portland situation if I would just come handle the wedding coordination. But every offer revealed the same fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. They still saw me as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be respected. "I have to go," I finally said. "I have a client presentation this afternoon for a campaign that could win a regional sustainability award. My colleagues in Portland are counting on me to deliver excellent work because they value my contributions and respect my expertise." "Don't you care about your family?" Mom asked desperately. "I care about having a family that cares about me," I replied. "When you're ready to have that conversation, you know where to find me." I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my Portland apartment, feeling simultaneously exhausted and liberated. The truth was finally out, documented and distributed to everyone who needed to see it. My phone immediately started buzzing with incoming calls from the family, but I turned it off and placed it in a drawer. Whatever happened next, they would have to figure out without expecting me to manage their crisis for them. For the first time in my adult life, I was free from their expectations and assumptions. The inheritance threat that had controlled my choices for years suddenly felt powerless against the reality of my independence and self-worth. I had finally stopped being the invisible daughter and become a visible woman with her own life, her own home, and her own choices. Within hours of our devastating phone conversation, my carefully documented presentation began circulating through the extended family network like wildfire. The power of modern digital communication meant that my comprehensive timeline of family dysfunction reached wedding guests, work colleagues, and family friends with ruthless efficiency. Sarah was the first to respond, calling my Portland number at 11:30 that evening. Her voice was shaky when I answered, clearly emotional, but trying to maintain composure. "Allison, I just saw your presentation," she said without preamble. "I had no idea about any of this. Marcus told me you were shy and preferred to work behind the scenes, not that your family had been ignoring your existence for 6 months." I curled up on my couch with a cup of chamomile tea prepared for what would likely be a long and complicated conversation. Sarah, I want you to know that none of this was intended to hurt you or ruin your wedding, I said carefully. I just thought you deserved to know the truth about the family dynamics you're marrying into. The truth? She laughed bitterly. Allison, this presentation is devastating. The screenshots of your mom talking to an empty room, the photos of family dinners using your chair for storage, the timeline of events you missed without anyone noticing. How is Marcus okay with any of this? That was the crucial question, wasn't it? How had Marcus, who supposedly loved and valued me as his sister, participated in 6 months of my complete invisibility without concern or curiosity? I don't think Marcus has ever really seen me as a person separate from my function in the family, I said slowly. To him, I've always been the reliable sister who handles logistics and manages problems. He's never had to think about my independent existence because I was always just there when he needed me. But you weren't there, Sarah said. You haven't been there for months, and he never noticed. We've been planning this entire wedding around your involvement, and he never once confirmed that you actually wanted to participate or could attend. I could hear the pain and anger building in her voice as the full implications sank in. Sarah, what Marcus did isn't necessarily malicious, I said, trying to be fair despite my own hurt. It's thoughtless and selfish, but it comes from years of family patterns where everyone assumed I would always be available. He's never had to consider my feelings or preferences because they've never been treated as important. That's not an excuse, she said firmly. That's an explanation, but it's not an excuse. I've been planning to marry someone who treats his sister like unpaid help and doesn't even notice when she disappears from his life. The conversation continued for over an hour as Sarah processed the information and its implications for her relationship with Marcus. She revealed that she had been concerned about certain family dynamics, but had attributed them to normal family stress rather than systemic dysfunction. Your mother has been calling me constantly with wedding changes and demands, Sarah confessed. She acts like the wedding is happening to her rather than for us. And Marcus just goes along with whatever she says because family harmony is important. That's very characteristic, I confirmed. Mom has always treated family events as opportunities to showcase herself rather than celebrate the people involved. And Emma. Sarah continued, she's been so demanding about bridesmaid arrangements and bachelorette party planning. She kept saying things like, Allison will handle the details whenever I asked about specifics. I thought you were just a private person who preferred to work behind the scenes. I prefer to be consulted before being volunteered, I said. But that's never been how this family operates. 2 days after our conversation, Sarah called again with a shocking update. I confronted Marcus about the presentation, she said. Allison, his reaction was unbelievable. He was angry at you for causing drama and insisted that you were exaggerating the situation for attention. My stomach sank. Even confronted with documented evidence of his neglect, Marcus was choosing to blame me rather than acknowledge the family's dysfunction. He said, you've always been high maintenance and prone to emotional manipulation. Sarah continued. He claimed that you probably moved to Portland specifically to create this situation and make everyone feel guilty. The gaslighting was breathtaking in its audacity. Marcus was rewriting history to position himself as the victim of my supposed manipulation rather than acknowledge his role in my emotional abandonment. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him that I've read every screenshot and seen every piece of evidence, Sarah said firmly. There's no way to manipulate a 6-month timeline of documented neglect. Either he failed to notice his sister's complete absence from family life, which makes him incredibly self-absorbed, or he noticed and didn't care, which makes him cruel. How did he respond to that? He said I was taking your side against family unity, she replied. He actually used the phrase family unity, like it meant something coming from someone who didn't notice his sister moved across the country. Sarah's voice was getting stronger and more decisive as she processed the situation. I've been thinking about this constantly, she continued. If Marcus can ignore his sister's complete disappearance for 6 months, how present will he be in our marriage when real problems arise? If his family can plan major events around someone's supposed availability without ever confirming that person's willingness to participate, what kind of communication patterns am I joining? Those are important questions. I agreed. I've decided to postpone the wedding, Sarah announced. I told Marcus that we need counseling before I'm comfortable making a lifelong commitment to someone who demonstrates such a fundamental lack of awareness about people he claims to love. The ripple effects continued throughout the week as extended family members, work colleagues, and family friends absorbed the information from my presentation. Uncle Richard Dad's brother, who owned a construction company, called to apologize for not reaching out when I moved and to express his shock at the family's behavior. I always knew your parents were a bit self-centered, he said, but I never imagined they could be so completely oblivious to their own daughter's well-being. Cousin Jennifer, who lived in Milwaukee and was supposed to attend the wedding, sent a long email expressing her horror at the documented neglect and her support for my decision to establish boundaries with the family. Even more surprising was the response from Marcus's law firm colleagues who had received the presentation. 2 partners called to express their concern and to clarify that Marcus's professional reputation would not be affected by his personal family dysfunction, though they were clearly disturbed by what they had learned. Meanwhile, the Chicago household was apparently in complete chaos. Emma called me repeatedly, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails that revealed the extent of the family crisis. "Allison, you need to fix this right now," her first message said. "Sarah is talking about canceling the wedding and Mom is having a complete breakdown. This is all your fault for being so dramatic about everything." Her second message was angrier. "I can't believe you would sabotage your own brother's wedding just to get attention. Do you have any idea how much money has been spent on this celebration? How many people are traveling to Chicago? You're being incredibly selfish." By her third message, desperation had crept in. "Please just call me back. We can figure out some kind of compromise. Maybe you don't have to be maid of honor, but you could still come to the ceremony as a regular guest. The family is falling apart and we need you to help fix it." The irony was rich. Emma, who had participated in 6 months of ignoring my existence, was now demanding that I return to save the family from the consequences of their own behavior. Mom left her own series of messages alternating between tearful guilt and angry blame. "I don't understand how this happened," she sobbed in one voicemail. "I thought we were close. I thought you were happy living at home and being part of the family. How could you just disappear without telling anyone?" In another message, she was furious. "Your presentation makes us look like monsters, Allison. You've taken normal family dynamics and twisted them to make us seem neglectful. Every family has communication issues, but most daughters don't humiliate their parents publicly when things aren't perfect." Dad's messages were shorter and more businesslike, but they revealed the extent of the social embarrassment the family was experiencing. "Several wedding guests have called to ask if the celebration is still happening," he said in one message. "Sarah's parents want to have a conference call about the family situation before they finalize their travel plans. You've created a public relations crisis that's affecting everyone, not just our immediate family." The presentation had accomplished exactly what I hoped it would. It had forced everyone to confront the reality of our family dysfunction, rather than allowing it to continue hidden beneath a veneer of normal family life. Tyler supported me through this chaotic week, bringing dinner when I was too emotionally drained to cook and listening as I processed each new development in the family crisis. "You did the right thing," he said one evening as we walked through the neighborhood around my apartment. "Dysfunctional families survive by keeping their problems private and expecting the victims to manage everyone else's feelings. You refuse to participate in that dynamic." "I keep wondering if I should feel guilty," I admitted. "The wedding might not happen because of my presentation." "The wedding might not happen because the groom's family demonstrated that they're incapable of basic respect and awareness," Tyler corrected. Sarah has every right to reconsider marrying into a family that could ignore someone for 6 months without noticing. As the original wedding date approached, the crisis reached its peak. The venue caterers and vendors all required final confirmations and payments. Wedding guests needed to know whether to cancel travel plans. Sarah's family was demanding answers about whether the celebration would proceed. And through it all, my family continued to expect me to return to Chicago and somehow fix the situation I had created by telling the truth about their behavior. But I stayed in Portland, attending my regular work meetings, having dinner with Tyler, and living my authentic life 2,000 miles away from the chaos they were demanding I manage. For the first time in my life, their crisis was not my emergency to solve. 3 weeks after my devastating phone call with Dad, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. She called to inform me that she and Marcus were going ahead with a small ceremony, but with radically different plans. "We're eloping," she announced during our phone conversation. "Just immediate family, a judge, and a simple reception afterward. No maid of honor, no elaborate coordination, no family drama." "How does Marcus feel about that?" I asked, curious whether my brother had gained any insight into his behavior. "He's frustrated because he wants the big celebration we originally planned," Sarah replied. "But I told him that I refuse to have a wedding that depends on someone who's been emotionally neglected by their own family. If we can't celebrate our marriage without exploiting unpaid labor from people who've been mistreated, then we need to rethink our approach." Sarah had used the crisis as an opportunity to establish healthy boundaries with my family from the beginning of her marriage. She had seen the documentation of how they treated me and refused to become complicit in similar patterns. "I want you to know that I'd still love to have you attend," she continued. "Not as a worker or coordinator, but as a guest who's welcomed and valued. Marcus is finally starting to understand that relationships require reciprocity and respect." 2 days later, Marcus called me himself. His voice was different than I had ever heard it, uncertain, humbler, lacking the confident assumption that he could charm his way through any situation. "Allison," he began hesitantly, "I owe you a massive apology. Sarah showed me your presentation again and walked through every screenshot and timeline entry with me. I've been forced to confront some really uncomfortable truths about how our family operates." I waited quietly, letting him continue without making it easier for him. "I never thought about whether you wanted to be involved in wedding planning," he admitted. "I just assumed you'd be excited to help because that's what you've always done. I never considered that you might have your own life and preferences and boundaries." "Go on," I said, not ready to offer forgiveness just yet. "The truth is, I've been selfish," Marcus continued. "Not just about the wedding, but about everything. I've treated you like a built-in support system instead of a sister. I've taken your help for granted without ever asking what you needed or wanted in return." It was the first time in my adult life that Marcus had acknowledged my independent personhood rather than just my utility to his goals. When Sarah told me she was postponing the wedding until we went to counseling, I was angry at first, he said. "I thought you had poisoned her against our family, but during our sessions, I've had to face the fact that everything in your presentation was true. We did ignore your existence for 6 months. Mom was having conversations with an empty room. We did plan a major family event around your supposed availability without ever confirming that you wanted to participate." The counseling had apparently been enlightening for both Marcus and Sarah as they examined the family patterns they were choosing to perpetuate or break. "I want to try to rebuild our relationship," Marcus said. "But I understand that has to happen on your terms, not mine. I can't just expect you to forgive me because it would be convenient for family harmony." Emma's evolution was more gradual and complicated. Her first response had been anger and defensiveness, but as the social consequences of the family's behavior became clear, she began questioning her own role in the dysfunction. She sent me a long email 3 weeks after the original wedding date, revealing that she had been in therapy processing her own family trauma. I've been reflecting on why I was so quick to blame you for causing drama instead of questioning why no one noticed you were gone, she wrote. I think it's because admitting that we ignored you for 6 months means admitting that we're capable of ignoring anyone who becomes inconvenient. Emma's email continued with surprising insight. I've been the baby of the family for so long that I never had to think about other people's needs. You and Mom always handled everything so I could focus on my own goals and challenges. But that meant I never developed the skills to notice when other people were struggling or needed support. Her apology was more nuanced than Marcus's acknowledging not just the immediate harm, but the systemic patterns that had created the situation. I'm working on becoming someone who notices when people are absent from family events, she concluded. Someone who asks questions instead of making assumptions. Someone who treats family members as individuals with their own lives rather than resources to be managed. Mom and Dad's journey toward accountability was slower and more resistant. Dad's business instincts made him want to resolve the situation quickly and efficiently. But genuine relationship repair couldn't be managed like a corporate merger. Mom's first attempt at reconciliation came through a care package sent to my Portland address, filled with homemade cookies and a card that said, "Missing you and hoping we can talk soon." The gesture was sweet, but didn't address any of the fundamental issues that had created our estrangement. After several unsuccessful phone calls where they focused on logistics and timeline rather than emotions and relationships, I suggested family therapy with a counselor who specialized in adult family dynamics. We need professional help to change patterns that have been entrenched for decades. I told them during a video call in April, this isn't something we can fix with good intentions and better communication alone. The therapy sessions conducted via video conference to accommodate my Portland residents were initially difficult and uncomfortable. Years of avoiding direct emotional conversation had left us all unpracticed at expressing feelings and needs clearly. But gradually progress emerged. Mom began acknowledging her tendency to view family members as extensions of herself rather than independent people. Dad started recognizing how his authoritarian parenting style had created compliance rather than genuine relationship. I realize now that when I threatened to disinherit you, I was essentially trying to buy your presence at family events, Dad admitted during one session. I was treating love like a business transaction where compliance could be purchased with financial incentives. The healing process wasn't linear or simple. There were setbacks and misunderstandings, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, and we had to consciously choose different responses. But 6 months after my devastating phone call, something beautiful began emerging from the rubble of our dysfunctional family system. Marcus and Sarah came to visit me in Portland for a long weekend, staying in a downtown hotel and experiencing my new city as tourists, rather than family members expecting hospitality. We hiked in the Columbia River Gorge, toured local breweries, and had long conversations about building healthy adult relationships. I love seeing you in your element, Sarah said as we walked through the Saturday market in downtown Portland. You seem confident and peaceful here in a way I never saw during family events in Chicago. Emma surprised me by asking to spend her vacation time in Portland, genuinely curious about my life rather than expecting me to return to theirs. We explored Powell's books together, attended a sustainable design conference, where I was presenting and had honest conversations about family roles and expectations. I never realized how much emotional labor you were carrying for all of us. Emma confessed over dinner at a farm-to-table restaurant near my apartment. Watching you present at that conference today, seeing your colleagues respect your expertise, it made me understand what we were asking you to sacrifice for our convenience. Even Mom and Dad eventually made the trip to Oregon their first visit to see where I actually lived, rather than expecting me to return to where they thought I should live. This is beautiful, Mom said as I showed them around my apartment with its exposed brick walls and views of the mountains. I can see why you love it here. It feels like you, Dad added quietly. I'm sorry it took us so long to see who you really are outside of what you could do for us. The most healing moment came during their visit when Mom looked around my living room, taking in the artwork I had created, the books I was reading, the plants I was nurturing. "I feel like I'm meeting you for the first time," she said with tears in her eyes. "I'm ashamed that I had a daughter for 30 years and never bothered to really know her." Tyler became an important part of these family healing conversations, offering perspective as someone who had witnessed healthy family dynamics and could help us identify patterns that needed changing. "The difference between your family now and your family 6 months ago," he observed during dinner with my visiting parents, "is that now everyone sees Allison as a person with her own life rather than a resource to be managed. That shift changes everything about how you relate to each other." Green Earth Design celebrated my first year with the company by promoting me to Associate Creative Director, recognizing both my professional growth and my leadership on several major sustainability campaigns. Jessica presented the promotion during a company meeting where my colleagues applauded not just my work quality, but my collaborative approach and innovative thinking. "Allison has brought something special to our team," Jessica announced. "Her ability to translate complex environmental concepts into compelling visual narratives has elevated every project she's touched." Standing in that conference room surrounded by colleagues who valued my contributions and recognized my potential, I felt the profound difference between being needed and being valued, between being utilized and being appreciated. The family business conversation took a different turn as well. Instead of using inheritance as leverage for compliance, Dad approached me with a genuine proposal for involving me in Patterson and Associates' future. "We're expanding into sustainability consulting for small businesses," he explained during a video call in late summer. "Your expertise in environmental marketing could be valuable if you're interested in collaborating remotely. This would be a partnership based on your skills and interests, not family obligation." For the first time, he was offering me a role that utilized my actual talents rather than just my availability. Marcus and Sarah's relationship grew stronger through the crisis rather than weaker. Their counseling sessions had taught them to identify and interrupt unhealthy family patterns before incorporating them into their marriage. "Going through that crisis together actually strengthened our relationship," Sarah told me during their second Portland visit. "We learned that we could handle difficult conversations and make hard decisions as a team. Marcus learned to prioritize our relationship over family pressure, and I learned to set boundaries from the beginning rather than hoping things would improve over time." They did eventually have a larger celebration of their marriage, but it looked completely different from the originally planned wedding. Instead of elaborate coordination and assigned family roles, they hosted a casual barbecue in a Chicago park where guests were invited to celebrate without obligations or expectations. "The best part was that everyone could just enjoy themselves," Marcus told me afterward. "No one was working to make the event happen so everyone could be present as guests rather than unpaid staff." I attended that celebration as Tyler's girlfriend rather than Marcus's sister, introducing him to extended family and enjoying the party as a participant rather than a coordinator. The difference was transformative. A year and a half after my devastating phone call, our family had evolved into something I hadn't thought possible, a group of adults who chose to spend time together because we enjoyed each other's company, rather than because obligation demanded it. The inheritance conversation eventually resolved in an unexpected way. Dad restructured his estate planning to create equal partnerships in expanded business ventures, rather than traditional inheritance arrangements. "I realized that using money to control relationships was toxic for everyone involved," he explained. "Instead of leaving you kids money when I die, I want to create opportunities for us to build something together while we're all still alive." My life in Portland flourished beyond anything I had imagined when I first made the decision to leave Chicago. Tyler and I moved in together after 18 months of dating, creating a home that reflected both our values and our individual personalities. We hosted dinner parties for our colleagues and friends, traveled to sustainability conferences together, and built the kind of partnership where each person's growth strengthened the relationship rather than threatening it. "You know what I love most about our life together?" Tyler said one evening as we watched the sunset from our apartment balcony. Everything we do is because we choose to do it together, not because someone expects us to, or because we're trying to meet someone else's definition of what we should be. The most profound change was internal. I had learned to recognize my own worth independent of my usefulness to others. I had developed the ability to say no to requests that didn't serve my well-being, and yes to opportunities that aligned with my values and goals. When family crises arose, I offered support as a sister and daughter, rather than as an unpaid crisis manager. When celebrations happened, I participated as someone who was welcomed rather than someone whose labor was expected. The documentation project that had initially felt like an act of desperate frustration became a template for other people struggling with similar family dynamics. Several friends and colleagues asked to see my presentation as a model for addressing their own situations of being taken for granted by family members. You showed that it's possible to love your family while refusing to enable their dysfunction. One friend said after reading my timeline, "That's a lesson I needed to learn for my own situation." Looking back on that devastating phone call and the family crisis it precipitated, I realized that the most important thing I said to Dad wasn't the response that froze him in place. The most important thing was everything that came after when I consistently chose my own well-being and authentic relationships over familial obligations and inherited patterns. True family, I learned, consists of people who notice when you're gone and celebrate when you're present. It includes people who see your worth beyond your willingness to serve their needs. It encompasses relationships built on mutual respect rather than historical obligation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable dysfunction, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. Sometimes justice looks like walking away from people who take you for granted and walking toward people who choose to see your value. The inheritance I ultimately received wasn't money or property, but something far more valuable than knowledge that I deserve to be loved for who I am, rather than what I can provide, and the courage to build relationships that honor that truth. My family didn't notice when I moved states, but in the end, that neglect became the foundation for building something better than what we had before. Not perfect, but authentic. Not easy, but honest. Not what they expected, but what we all deserved. As I write this from my Portland apartment looking out at the mountains that represent the life I chose for myself, I'm grateful for that devastating phone call that changed everything. It taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept less than you deserve, even from the people who gave you life. That phone call didn't just free me from my family's expectations, it freed all of us to discover what real love looks like when it's based on choice rather than obligation, respect rather than utility, and authentic connection rather than inherited patterns. And that ultimately was worth more than any inheritance they could have given me. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, like your needs and dreams didn't matter as much as everyone else's convenience? Share your story in the comments below and let me know how you found the courage to prioritize your own well-being. If this resonated with you, please like this video to help others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics find it. Subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself when others won't choose you. And share this with anyone who needs permission to value themselves as much as they value others. Remember, you deserve to be seen, heard, and celebrated for who you are, not just what you can provide. Thank you for listening. And may you find the courage to build the life and relationships you truly deserve.